Hello and welcome to a Taylor's Tales podcast. This is Chris's Corner. I'm your host, Chris Taylor, and I am back this week with a brand new episode. And I thought I'd take the time this week to focus on something that none of us can actually do at the moment, or if you're in a bigger country other than the United Kingdom and have the ability to do so, travel. One of my favorite things to talk about, one of my favorite things to reminisce about, and think of all the things that are possible in the future as well. Destinations. We all love the idea, the holiday, the getaway, or even for those lucky enough, the constant sort of transferring. No, traversing. That was the word I was looking for. Traversing of the earth, and it's I'm doing this on the fly a little bit. I really want to dive into traveling. I've talked about it in a previous podcast, one of the first podcasts I did, episode 2 with Johnny Edwards, and we delved into it, like some of our previous experiences. But what I want to talk about in this is an overview, like a generalization, something that's available for everybody to talk about. And I want to put in some of my own experiences to maybe give some advice, but also to sort of broaden people's minds a little bit and on the possibilities, not to sound self-righteous and sort of lecturing already. We're already in what we like 5 seconds into the podcast. But anyway, my point being is that something that has been lacking at the moment, uh, because of the pandemic, is the ability to visit other places and to sort of meet new people. And obviously, that's not the top priority at the moment. It's people's health. However, I would like to say that, you know, getting away from your home is a blessing because it allows you to sort of remind yourself what's important and also give yourself a break. You know, everything comes with the ups and downs of life at the moment. And it does feel like a bit of a wave, in the sense that we're coming in with the tide, we're going out with the tide, and we're getting some really good news, and then all of a sudden we got another third wave, and so on and so forth. But traveling, I feel, to me, is always been positive and always been something that I look back on and look forward to whenever I'm and not that I would want to travel full time, because I've seen from YouTube channels and from other people who've traveled and do that, it is a job in itself. It is extremely difficult to get right, and also you have to be someone who is fully committed to that lifestyle. It's a very lifestyle of, I would say, in the moment, but also a lot of planning and the ability to make sort of last minute decisions with the added stress. Um, I do like a mix and match. I'm not somebody who can say that he is, you know, I do like structure, but I also love to be able to have change. And at the moment, that's what we're missing. We're missing a little bit of change, using the royal we there as well. This is including anyone who's listening or watching, in the sense that I imagine you feel that the world's gotten a lot smaller recently. And if you're like me, you found it rather difficult, and that in the sense of your mentality. I'm a very positive person, as you may have noticed for so far, and I will continue to be a positive person. But one of the ways for me to basically refresh, reconnect, meet new people, come back with a fresh mindset and a fresh attitude to my work, to my friends, to my family, and come back feeling like the person they know and love, rather than the guy who, after consecutive amounts of work, um, is starting to get a little bit more stressed, little bit more, shoulders up. I've talked about this, the pent up aggression, the sort of, as soon as you go away, you sort of allow new people into your life, and you allow new opportunities when you travel, and you're not so structured. You do what, open yourself up to new possibilities, and also just a little bit of fun. That's it. That's what we're looking for. And maybe some people were lucky enough to go on holiday during, I think it was like August, September of last year. I wasn't willing to take that risk, purely for family, purely because I worry about other people's health, and that's just a personal preference rather than anything out there. And I think, in my mind, That's the first thing I'm going to do. As soon as the government like open up the airwaves and we know it's safe to travel, I'm gonna be out there. I've got like a list of places, but we'll get into that later on. It's not, you guys don't want to just hear the list of things that I'm gonna do. What I'm gonna first dive into is actually a little bit of my past and a little bit of how I got into traveling, because I think it's kind of key, because it sounds like quite a privileged thing, doesn't it? Like, first world problem sort of thing. Oh, we can't travel, Chris. There's people dying. Very true. It's very true. So I'm going to adjust it a little bit. I've not always been lucky enough to be able to travel. Actually, the majority of the foreign travel that I've done has been paid by, I say majority, nearly all of the foreign travel I've done has been paid by me, and has been basically, I've had to earn and scrape it together through any sort of work that I've done. And the first piece of travel I did when I was 19 on my own was paid for by working at a crappy part-time role at a car company. Well, I say car, I'm not going to mention their name. And then also working part-time at a bar at the same time when I was 19. And, that's tough work. And you're getting minimum wage, and you're just, scraping together the possibility of, a way to get abroad, and a way to get out of the hustle and bustle of life. So, just giving you a sort of background, I wasn't always lucky enough. Like I said, I didn't leave Europe until I was 19. Again, now that I'm looking back at 25, 19 is quite young still. There's people out there I know who haven't even left Europe, and they are 25 or older. So there is that. I am putting this out as a preface, as this is obviously not going to sort of affect everyone, but I'm going to carry on. I was the kid from the age of 3 to 16 that basically we do the same holiday every year. My dad, me, and my sister from age 10 to 16 did this holiday. My mum was nice enough to do camping basically with us from the age of 3 to 10. She just basically said never again after that. Never again. Never anywhere that doesn't provide electricity. And it was a life change. I think I was. It's one of those privileged things that you either love it or hate it. Camping. I love it to this day. It introduced me to other kids my age. I'd go nuts. The entire summer we'd be out there. It felt like a lifetime when we'd go. We'd go to this place in Dorset called, which is only down the road now, which is kind of crazy, in Blandford Forum, uh, called the Inside Park. Shout out to the Inside Park. It was this place, going back as an adult, it's just literally a field with campsite, a campsite with sort of loads of tents and stuff like that, and then you've got like a park for all the kids, and you've got a couple of goals up there for playing football on, and then you've got like an endless forest with loads and loads of trails. And it felt to me like the safest place on earth. It felt like a refuge away. I'm telling you guys this because it provides a backstory to my life. I felt that this wasn't actually the inspiration for me to travel abroad. I think if I'd carried on doing this all the way until onwards, I probably wouldn't have left the UK for a very, very long time, because it built up this idealistic view of, this is my sort of safe place to go to. Because I remember when I got into my teen years, it felt like a breath of fresh air away uh, from Reading and from where I was from. And I didn't have that experience of going, my world was quite small. As a kid, it feels massive, doesn't it? It feels, where you're from, you feel so like, I can go down the road and play football with random, kids your own age, and you can go skateboarding and go at the park and skateboard and ride a bike and all of these things, and your world feels massive. But as you get older, as you slowly progress through the years, you start to realize, like, oh man, there's a bigger world out there that I've never even seen. And there was two things that basically took me from a kid who basically only ever holidayed. And I think I went to Spain when I was 7, and then Spain again when I was 11 for a school trip, and then France with the family when I was, I think, 12 or 13, maybe 14 at push. So those are like my my foreign experiences. Not to sound ungrateful, because they were fun, definitely fun. But as you can hear, that I wasn't exactly exposed on a regular basis to regular foreign travel, and I think that's a good thing. I think that actually made me have a little bit of respect and lust to be able to go to other places. And there were a couple of things that I definitely remember being that switched my mind. And it wasn't until I was around 17, 18 that these sort of ideas clicked in. And the idea that, oh, damn, I need to do more of this. I need to go new places. So it wasn't until I was 17 that I had actually gone to Scotland. I'd gone to Wales before when I was younger. And I love Wales. I love Pembrokeshire area. It's beautiful, and the forests and the hills and the ocean, and yeah, absolute beautiful place. And I was considering going to university at Aberystwyth, I remember, just because of how much I was like sort of had a sort of idealistic view of Wales at that time. And the story goes on. I know this is quite a long prequel era here. My point being, I got to 17. I'd been to Spain, France, and Scotland and Wales. And it was in Scotland that I'd gone to Fort William, and my dad took me to the Isle of Skye. It was a son and father bonding experience. I'd never holidayed on my own with my dad. It had been always with either my mum, my sister there, or someone else, or one of a friend. And so it was this really sort of inspiring trip that for the first time ever, me and my dad, like, we went up north. It was something like a 12-hour journey there. We drove from Reading all the way up into Fort William and then into Skye. And we were staying in this beautiful campsite under the mountain of Ben Nevis. Now, when we first visited, we visited in over a weekend, and it was beautiful. The green mountains covered in a mist and blue skies that were endless. And I remember seeing them for the first time and being awestruck at how magnificent the nature could be just in its raw form. And Scotland is just so underrated in the sort of far north. It's just absolutely. I remember a 17-year-old this was, oh God, 8 years ago. And it blew my mind. It blew my mind how I remember standing on this hilltop. We thought it was the Three Sisters at the time, the Three Sisters Mountains, where we were standing. It wasn't, but it was a very similar area in the Isle of Skye. And myself and my dad we climbed to the top of this hill slash mountain area, and we saw into this valley that led into the Atlantic Ocean. Mountains on either side, and a valley that was just felt like it was going on forever. And I remember being in that moment and thinking, this is life. This is an adventure. I have to have more. I have to, I remember being in the moment and feeling like for the first time in quite a while, because all I'd known at that point was very select areas: Reading, Dorset, maybe, these small areas in France and Spain. I wouldn't even be able to point on a map probably where I was in France at the time. And I remember feeling the world slightly getting bigger. And when you're a teenager, you have a lot of things going on in your mind. And for me, I was like anyone else. I was just all over the place. My mind was, what do I do with my future? I'm not getting the grades that I want at the moment. I'm not doing the things that I want to do. What do I do? And it was the best distraction that I needed, and also something that would lead on to, I think, a massive change in my life. And what I'm trying to say here for those out there is that if you haven't had this click, this lifestyle change, I think it's still out there for you. I think one thing that makes me laugh is when somebody who hasn't ventured out of their home country, they're in their 20s, and they're still saying that, I've heard this from people who are from the UK, like the UK is the best country in the world. And it makes me laugh because it's just like, it's kind of naive, it's kind of arrogant, and it's kind of not true at all. There's plenty of places that are better than the UK. I can tell you, I could start listing them off now, but I'm not gonna before I insult any more people from the UK and lose my passport. Um, so I think what I'm trying to get at here is that I think out there it doesn't have to cost you an arm and a leg. My dad, I remember he filled up the entire tank of the car, and we were driving this Vauxhall 4-seater car that his company had provided him, and it cost like, I think it was a good £120 on petrol alone to get there. So obviously, compare that to, going abroad. That's nothing compared to some of the flights that you can get out nowadays. You can do a budget holiday, anything like that. Um, it's just finding that moment. And I'm going to dive in a little bit further. Was one of my experiences was actually going on another father and son adventure a year later. When I turned 18, my dad said, "Right, lad, I'm going to treat you. This is the treat for turning 18." And we were going to do 3 weeks in France. And that was just another, I said I went to France earlier. We're talking about like not like a house in the middle of nowhere where it had a swimming pool, and then my mum, my aunt, and my dad, they just wanted to sit by the pool the entire time. And me being a kid of extreme adventure, this, was a very boring holiday. The one we were about to go on, myself and my dad, was planned to be pure adventure. It was just explore some of the parts of France that we'd never seen before. I mean, I'd never been to Paris. I'd never seen Paris before. It's just, and I loved every second of it. And I think what I'm trying to get across is this passion, this love for going to new places and trying to do new cultures, try and experience new cultures. One of the things that I really tried hard at, and my dad was so much better than me, was speaking French. My dad's French at the time, not, I don't know what it's like now, but he was basically able to converse with the locals and they'd understood him. And even though they knew full well he was English, they tolerated it, which from some experiences I have heard from people, that's pretty good for, from French people. So it can go one way or another, really. And I try my best as well, asking for food. I just remember, using je voudrais and trying to not offend people, and using salut and au revoir, and using the common things. At 18, I felt like I was a bit of a grown up by asking for a meal. I remember asking for chili con carne with the waitress, and she smiled. I think she was quite pleased. And this was in a rural area of France that they clearly had tourists there on a regular basis. So she was being very kind at the time. And it was these little things where you venture into new territory, you go into the unknown, and I think that was the sort of match that ignited my curiosity, especially within to different cultures, and the idea to basically broaden my mind of what reality truly is and what other people are dealing with. When you travel, one thing that is quite common is that because you're, from me, white, middle class, male, all these privileged sort of positions, you're going to see the best in the world because you're putting the money out there. As I've got older, I've actually tried to seek elsewhere. I haven't always gone for like the top dollar. I like to travel light. I like to go to places that are cheaper, like hostels, and I like to be able to sort of go to places that have a little bit of roughness to them to be able to actually experience what the locals are experiencing. That's not always the case, by the way. That's not always the case. I can't say that's probably like 10% of the time, but it still has a massive impact on you nonetheless. And one thing that I'm trying to also emphasize with traveling is that you come back a different person. You come back realizing like, oh damn. And I don't want to make this sound like I'm somebody who's anti-UK, because this is where I'm from. You don't really, you know, you could be born in a lot of places that aren't as nice, but you do start to realize that there's a lot of faults from where you're from, and you start picking at them, and that's a negative that does come with this. So as you broaden your mind, it's like Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden in the story. They're like, they're blind at first, and then their eyes are opened, and the idea that, you know, the scales fall off, and they start to see the real world. And when they see the real world, they're shocked, and they don't realize what they've, you know, what they've got. To me, when I started to realize, I started really disliking where I was from. I really wanted to just get out of here, get out. And, you know, that's not a good attitude, because you are going to have to, when you're younger, you're going to have to basically put yourself in a lot of situations that are going to feel like crap, because you're building who you are. You're building a resume, you're building a life resume. And it's both. You've got your CV, your curriculum vitae for your jobs, and then you've got your life resume, which is what you're going to, actually, the second one is more important, because it's the one the majority of people are going to want to tell when they tell stories, and when they do what I've just done, where I build like a background of what I've done, so that you understand that, well, I wasn't always this way. I wasn't always open-minded. I was naive. I didn't really understand the world around me. I was angry at the world. I remember when I was like 17, I know it's hard to picture me, you know, a smiley human being as someone who was angry. But when I first met, and you've seen Jordan on the podcast before, Jordan Green, I was like this kid who was listening to like pop punk. I was angry at the world. And it's just that typical middle class thing where you go, you know, typical young lad who's just angry for no reason. And it doesn't have to be that way. You don't have to. I think it's also because you don't know what to do. You're sort of lost. And for me, the solution, I know it's bad, but it's almost like I was running away from my problems. And I know it's crazy to say, but the traveling, as I traveled more, my life seemed to get better. I actually, as I'd built this money up for my first foreign sort of travel, um, I actually got my first job in the IT industry. And that IT job gave me enough holiday to be able to take 3 weeks off, 3 or 4 weeks off, I remember. And I was going to go to Australia and New Zealand, and I did. And that was the first job I took, to Australia and New Zealand. How crazy is that? I was so lucky. I was so happy. But I knew for a fact I'd earned it, because I spent 2 years at this part-time job while I was in sixth form. And I remember spending another 6 months at a pub, and, you know, grinding away as a dishwasher, and then eventually a barman and stuff like that. And I remember doing all those and earning the money, and then getting to my IT job and being like blown away by the fact that, you know, I was getting paid more money, and I had holiday to use. And I was like, wow, like finally I can take this trip. And it was a trip of a lifetime, because I was 19 at the time. And it's scary, you know, when you're talking about it with your friends, and you're scared of the unknown. When it finally hits you that you're leaving, and you get on that plane, you feel both a little bit of adrenaline run through you, but also the fact that, oh damn, like there's no going back from here. I'm only going forward. And I think we all need that. It is a extremely scary thing to take that first step. We all have different priorities in life, but I think this one needs to be given to everyone. I think this opportunity to be able to maximize your understanding of the world, and not just your local neighborhood, is going to give you that ability to be able to make judgment calls that are going to encompass more than just yourself and your local people. It's a care for the world and the human race. And I've heard many people I respect say they're citizens of the world, rather than just, you know, I'm from here. And I do like that, because it does mean that you can converse with other people. I hate the fact that I can only speak English properly. And I can barely do that, as you may have noticed. My point being is that I'm trying my best to learn languages. I'm trying to do German and French at the moment and continue that. And as much as that's a thing I've started to do now, I should have done it younger. I wish I had. It would have been a lot easier, and it would have been a lot more useful as I've grown older. One thing that I do realize is that there's a lot of French and German people who travel as well, and they're amazing people to talk to as well, and they've had a lot of experience traveling, and it's great to see people from Europe travel elsewhere. And it's also great to see, it's great to see Americans, Australians, New Zealanders, Canadians, like, but they all speak English, so it's just like, there's not much of a barrier there. It's very easy to get across the message to people like that. But being able to converse, and here's the downside, is that the majority of the Europeans speak better English than some of the people in England. So it's kind of embarrassing on our part as a nation. That's why, this is why I do criticize the UK a little bit, because there's a little bit of ignorance coming in from us, especially when it comes down to language barriers and showing people a little bit of respect for the ability to converse in our language, but we're not the other way around. One thing that I try to do nowadays as well is really sort of push myself to not assume the person I'm speaking to speaks English. And I'm willing to embarrass myself. I've done it many a time when I've gone up to somebody and tried to start a conversation, and it's happened the other way around. And I felt extremely bad for people I met, for instance, in Vietnam, when they were trying to have a conversation with me and I was on my way to doing something, and they wanted to say, oh, we wanted to practice our English. And I was there for 5 minutes, and then I had to run off because I think I was going to specifically, I had a booking for a museum or something at the time. I can't remember why, but yeah, I had to move on. I felt really bad because that would have been a perfect opportunity to basically help these people and, create this, break down the barrier, and provide people with an opportunity. And it's vice versa, isn't it? You want to do the same with languages elsewhere. So enough on a tangent of languages in Europe. I'm going to get back to the story a little bit. So we talked about Scotland and my cities, standing on the top of that mountain and just viewing. This was before Instagram was around at the time, but it wasn't like a big thing. I didn't get Instagram until 2016, and by that time I'd already traveled to Australia, New Zealand, Scotland, and France, like I said. And Scotland and France were with my dad, so it doesn't really count. And then, yeah, also Australia, New Zealand, and Italy, specifically Rome. So those three countries were done independently. And obviously, when you travel, it's become more popular. And as it's become more popular, it's been placed on, as a way to brag. But I remember when I was discovering it, I was like, there was no way to sort of share this with people. It was like you took photos, and then those photos were for you. They weren't for anyone else, I never even thought in my lifetime I would be sharing these photos with anyone else. I remember I may have shared one photo on Facebook at some point in 2012 and immediately regretted it, because at the time you don't realize what's a good photo and what's not. And like I say, you're young and you're surrounded by young people as well, and there's a level of a lack of appreciation from people at that age. And I'm hoping that, even though it's a positive and a negative, that social media does provide kids with this, like, wow, that's real, that's a place, I can go there, I can fly there and get there. And I'm hoping that's, the generation that's part of my generation and the generation below me have that opportunity to do so and to broaden. So France specifically, when I went there with my dad, the first place we went to, we'd stayed in like the center of France, like really middle. We'd driven through Paris and we'd got to the center, and I can't remember the place, but it was this beautiful field where all the chateaux of France were based. So all of the castles, basically, that were ruled by the kings and queens of France. That were huge white marble places, extraordinary structures that I remember at the time seeing this spiral staircase in one of them that was just crazy. It had this optical illusion that when you looked up, that it looked like there was two. It was like a double helix staircase, and it was just, I was seeing new history. There's a lot of stuff that you taught when you're younger that the French are the enemy, basically, until World War II. And that's a very English thing to learn, the Battle of Agincourt and stuff like that. And I remember seeing this stuff and being like, wow, this is crazy. The French have history as well. And it's really cool. And you've seen an English castle. It doesn't look well maintained at all. You go to France, you go to one of these the great castles there, and it's like, whoa. And the weather at the time, I think it was either July, so it was peak summer, and just boiling hot, and it was brilliant. And I just remember being super happy, and it was a real eye opener. And it was once we'd gone from the middle of France, we'd seen the chateaus and some of the French culture there. We went out to the border of Switzerland, basically, and we saw again mountains, a very different type. The Swiss Alps are just, they're extraordinary in a different way to Scotland's mountains. It's hard to, it's almost like the French and Swiss mountains have a very beautiful, sort of smooth and very Instagrammable vibe to them. And then Scotland's rugged and it's raw and it's got the earth and the natural feel to it. Feels like somebody in France basically, jaggedly got something and chipped them together. And I remember seeing this valley in France, and being, again, having that wow, wow moment. What is this place? This is incredible. This is just a new world. And we were placed in this campsite that was directly below the mountains. In the middle of nowhere, there was literally just a town of wooden houses spread around uh, the fields, and there was restaurants and stuff like that. But there was a village, and there was mountains, and then the road going in and out of the place. That was it, and it led into Switzerland. And to me, it was just like, what? There's civilizations out here. How do they live? Because you're used to a town, where you can walk to the next, you can get a train into the city center or the town center. And there was no way you could be able to, there's no transport, basically. There wasn't trains out there. There was just, if you had a car, you can get in and out. That's it. You ain't walking to the next town, I can tell you that. It's if I can find a photo, what I'll do is I'll put it as the sort of thumbnail of this video, because it's stunning. It's just something else altogether. And if I can find it, I'm sure I will be able to, if I go through the photo album, because after we'd done this, my dad made photo albums for me, so to remember them both. And him and my mum, very 90s thing to do was, I say 90s, pre sort of digital era. They still do the photo books and the photo albums, which is kind of cool because you can physically look through them, and it does have that, it's like a book, really. I don't like those tablet books, things that have loads of books in them. I like a physical book. Again, sounds kind of pompous, but whatever. Point being was, France and Scotland were the eye openers. They were like the first taste, but they weren't truly, for me, they were me and my dad. So I wasn't on my own. I hadn't had that scary, oh, how do I do this? I always had someone there to look after me. And I think this is really key here, because when you do first travel on your own, it's such a, just, I'm an adult. I can do stuff. I can be my own person. This is why the pandemic's difficult, because we lack our freedoms. We lack the ability to travel and to do things that we want to do. We become what we used to be rather than what we are. And once you've experienced your freedoms, it's very hard to put the the genie back in the lamp after you've started rubbing it. It's exactly that. And so my first travel experience for me was Australia, and I was visiting my best friend Alex Young, who's been on the podcast before. He'd moved out there when we were 18, and when I'd gone to France, that was the last time I saw him for another year and a half. Uh, and that felt like a lifetime, a year and a half before you go see your friend. And at that age, it does feel like an extremely long time. Now, in the pandemic of having a year of it, feels like nothing. And so I remember the first place I stayed. So again, this is quite important. This wasn't truly solo because I was meeting someone out there. And I stayed with Ali for a week, and I was in Victor Harbor, beautiful beach, sea townside of Adelaide. And it was about an hour and a half drive from Adelaide to Victor Harbor, and just a beautiful, beautiful place. Again, Australians, man, they make the best impression. I got there and I felt immediately at home, and they were just everyone welcoming. Everyone was just the kindest, and I'll always remember that. I'll always remember. God, makes me a little bit emotional, man, because it's kind of it's a part of my life that made me believe in people. I remember coming back from that trip, and even if I just spent a week there with Ali and his family and all of the amazing people I met there, probably would have made the best impression they possibly could have been, especially on the world, especially on, like, someone who's 19 years old and questioning life and questioning people and not knowing what's going on and what's good and what's bad. And you have your first job, and you work extremely hard to do the best you can. And it was an eye opener that there's a lot of good people out there. It's not there's and this, what the crazy thing is that actually further down the line I started to realize that the world is full of amazing people. And this is the truth. The world media make you think that there's a lot of negative things going on. They make you think that there's negative people, lots of bad things going on. That's not the truth. The individual is a good person, and I believe that to my heart and soul. There is some people who ruin it for other people. They're the minority. They're not the majority. Those who break the rules in times of need, like we are now, they're not the majority. That's the thing. We need people who are willing to break the rules when necessary, when it's truly necessary, but when we need to stay united, we do not. And I remember going to Australia, and it was after I'd visited Ali that I would have my first solo experience. I was in Melbourne for, I think it was a week and a bit, and I would go in Melbourne. I'd explore the city. I'd see the graffiti areas, and I remember being in love with Melbourne the moment I went there, going to the beach nearby, and just getting on the tram and eating good food and enjoying the sun and the parks, and just being truly in love with the place. I'd never been in love with the place before. I'd loved France, I loved Scotland, but this was the first solo place. I remember listening to Californication by Red Hot Chili Peppers and being like, yeah, man, this is me, this is mine. The saddest thing is that was back in 2015. It's now 2021. I haven't been back to Melbourne since, and it breaks my heart, man. Breaks my heart, because it's an absolute beautiful place, and I really hope to return there soon. And I would love to have a house there, without any doubt, in my mind. There's a lot of beautiful places I've seen in the world, but Melbourne is just such a absolutely beautiful city. And that's very, for me personally, like, I went to Sydney for a day, so I can't say I explored Sydney that much. I went there for a day and went to Bondi and did surfing and stuff like that. But that doesn't really, you can't say you've been to Sydney and you've been there for a day. It doesn't count. And I just think to myself, like, damn, there's so many good things I'm going to do. I'm going to revisit. I'm going to go to new places. I mean, I've only seen 3 cities in Australia. Haven't been to Canberra, haven't been to Perth, Haven't been to the far, far north of Australia as well. I've forgotten that. The northern. It's gonna kill me now. There's Newcastle, then there's I can't remember. Damn, that's gonna kill me. I'll point it up here on the screen, and future Chris will be like, "Damn, man, you should remember that." Anyway, moving on. New Zealand. Now let's talk about probably the most probably my favorite country on earth. Like, I love Australia, but New Zealand is something else. Like, it's a combination of natural beauty, adventure, and absolutely amazing people, and downright just linking the Lord of the Rings to a real world place. And I tell you what, if you ever get the chance, go there. It's just absolutely breathtaking place. And I think that New Zealand, I was only there for a couple of weeks overall. I think it was a total, like the holiday itself was 4 or 5 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks. I can't, no, it must have been oh my God. Yeah, it must have been only there for a week. My God. In New Zealand. Again, haven't been there since 2015. And because of the pandemic, I was meant to go back this year. And, there was a lot of traveling I was meant to do in 2020. Which never came to pass because of things that happened. And obviously 2021 is looking very similar, and that they're not opening up until 2022. So it's probably going to be 2022 when I actually go back. So yeah, 7 years it will have been since I have been to New Zealand. And that is kind of, truly sad, but at the same time, it's going to make the adventure that much more. And I'm trying to get across here to you guys. I'm going to highlight some things. Maybe I'll split this podcast into two parts, because I've realized how long I'm going on for. And having someone lecture you on traveling and not having actually been there is probably the worst thing to hear ever. So I think what I'll do is give some of the highlights of New Zealand, and we'll talk about future, traveling experiences that I have that are going to give you some more, background, some new places to go that you may want to go to. But Australia, you have to go to. It's like, it's got to be one of those things that you say to people and you click with that person, because they understand you. They understand the joy that you've had there. I'd happily get a passport from, a visa to live in Australia and New Zealand, both of them, without even thinking about it. I think that the Commonwealth countries are, ironically, I would say that the other countries of the Commonwealth are actually better than the UK, like all four of them, even though the UK has a better like economy sort of thing. And, there's a lot of other things that the UK has benefits for, like schooling and the NHS and all of those things. I would say that the other four nations have some other positives and negatives, because obviously there's negatives and positives to every country. But New Zealand, I am, as you know, a massive Lord of the Rings fan. So when I got to New Zealand, I remember being the most excited I've ever been. As soon as I got there, they have the massive dwarf statue in the Auckland airport, and I just remember being the happiest guy ever. So if you ever get to the North Island, right, a couple of things that you've got to do. Number one, go to Piha Beach. It is absolutely beautiful. It's Jurassic. It reminds me of one of the places on Earth where it's been undisturbed, basically. It's a surf town, and it's got the best waves ever. Nearly died there. We'll talk about that another time. But, the beach itself is just, and they do some great food. Great food. Very, very pleased with. I remember being extremely happy with that. And the other things that I would say, I remember the waterfront and I want to say Watiki. I think it's Watiki Island. I'm pronouncing again terribly wrong, but I basically took a canoe from Auckland Harbour with a tour guide, and we basically paddled in a canoe across to the island. We walked, took the sort of canoes, put them on the beachfront, and then we walked all the way up to, as a group, to the top of the island, and we watched the sunset on Auckland. And I remember just having, again, one of my favorite experiences. And believe it or not, if you're still listening to this podcast, you'll realize that that sunset that you see as my background for the YouTube channel, that's the sunset of what I'm talking about right now, of New Zealand. That is Auckland that you're seeing there, and I'm taking it from Watiki Island. It is one of the most memorable memories I have in my life, and I just remember being 19 and feeling, and the world was such a positive place, and that I was going to do so much, and it got better. You see that, like I said, I did the canoeing and I did surfing on Piha Beach, and I canoed across the island. I watched the sunset, and from there, and here's a thing that I remember from Auckland that I will never forget. It is the banana smoothie that I got at the harbour front, where there's this amazing little smoothie place. So if you're ever there, do hit it. It's got a green banner with orange writing, and it's got some of the best smoothies. They were really good for you as well, and they taste amazing. And I remember the vanilla one, the banana one, the exotic tropical one, and they were, relatively good pricing. And it was just one of those little things, those little perks that you get when you're in New Zealand, and it's just so much fun. And from there, I went and I got on this speedboat, and I recommend this to everyone, because I had a smile on my face the entire time I was on it, and went around the harbor, and it whizzed round, and we were in this massive boat, and the waves crashing over. At 19, I was just absolutely in my element. I loved it. I loved being by the ocean. I loved being in the waves and getting soaked, and being like, basically I was on a roller coaster ride for a good 10 minutes in this speedboat. It was red, and it was just. And if you're thinking to yourself, like, oh, I don't have the money for these things, then don't worry about it. Go explore the city. Go do what I did as well, where one day I went and just climbed up Mount Eden and just sat at the top and listened to Michael Jackson's Thriller album, and just feeling the king of the world. And got the bus there. Got the bus to there. I remember doing, got to when I'm saying the bus, I mean like from Auckland city centre to the bottom of Mount Eden, because that is a little bit of a distance. I don't know how far it is now, because I haven't done it in a while. But yeah, these little experiences, they really stick in your mind, and I'm trying to get that across, because I want you to have these little things maybe that you want to experience yourself. Go do these. And another one, here's the killer. Here's the best way to end the podcast, and we'll come back to part 2 another day. Maybe next weekend we do part 2 of traveling, because I didn't realize how much how much stuff I have to say on this matter. Oh God, oh, you poor listener. So point being is that I went to Hobbiton, 19 years old, and I'd already achieved one of my dreams in my life, to have visited Hobbiton, to have been to part of the Lord of the Rings set. And I was so lucky, because I'd just finished watching the trilogy with my dad of The Hobbit at the cinemas. So we'd done 2012, 2013, 2014, seen all of them at the cinema together. We'd had the best time, and we'd seen all of them. And then Peter Jackson released the Hobbit documentary that showed all the behind the scenes, and I'd watched it and prepared for it before I'd gone to New Zealand, and I knew all the places that I wanted to see. And I remember getting to Hobbiton and being like, this was here, man, I'm here. And I took photos, and the photos it didn't show what I was seeing. Endless fields. And I was reading the Lord of the Rings at the time, the Fellowship, and I only got, I remember reading up to a quarter of the way through and then stopping. So take a pinch of salt when you listen to me, because I didn't read all of them, sadly. Still something I need to do. And I got to have a cider at the Green Dragon. I get to say that, man. I got to have a cider made by the people there in the Green Dragon. I sat there by the fire. this was mid-April, so the fact that they had a fire there made me laugh. I just felt just one of those warm memories that just make you smile, and just, yeah, man, you got to do it. I'm not going to say anything more than that. I think that the Hobbiton is just such a key, and that's not the only thing. I haven't even talked about some of the other things that I did in New Zealand. Like, I went to another island where I did sort of zip lining across the island from one part to another, going through the rainforest, learning about the rainforest there, and again looking like a numpty and doing all these things. And I just remember doing this all within the space of a week. And then I had to do a 32-hour long flight from New Zealand back home to the UK, and then going straight back into the work after doing that. So it's pretty intense. So leaving it on that, leaving you guys with some, the spark. What caused the travel, the need to travel, and the want to travel, and why is it so important, and why, do we in the pandemic need it back so badly, and can you do it yourself, and can you do it on your own? And I say yes. Go forth, go explore the world, go find it. And when we're back, when everything's normal, and when in 2022, when you are able to go to Australia and go to New Zealand, do that. I'll expand upon a couple of the points I've made in this podcast in part 2 of this, and I will go over. This may need to go into part 3 as well, because I want to talk about some of the other experiences, one of my most recent travels, but I also haven't talked about Rome, haven't talked about New York, Toronto, Reykjavik in Iceland. Haven't talked about what I was experiencing at the time. I did video blog those experiences, and I did the same with Australia and New Zealand, and haven't looked back on them recently because they're so positive on my mind, they're so fresh that I don't really need to. They're there forever. So, ending on such a high note, a smile on my face, and I'm hoping that you, the listener, got something out of this. I hope that you're thinking to yourself, maybe I might go to that smoothie place in New Zealand, and maybe I need to go to Scotland. Maybe I need to, find my own spark, find my new thing that I'm going to go out and experience. And maybe I want to experience a new culture and try my best to not use my English, and maybe try and use the language that person's using. Thank you for listening as always. This has been a Taylor's Tales podcast. This is Chris's Corner. I'm your host, Chris Taylor. And as always, I hope to see you this time next week.